Travis Wayne Goodsell. Still waiting for the mailman, unless he's already come and gone and I didn't get anything yet again. Day 2 for the lawsuit papers. Day 3 for the other mail that I was expecting. I can't do anything because of the adjusted bus schedule and the hotter temperatures during the afternoon as we're getting closer and closer to the afternoon. Alrighty. I got a whole bunch of projects I could be doing and would have been doing if I'd only known that the mailman is bringing something today and when they were coming. But because coronavirus is thrashing our postal service, everything's going to hell. Alrighty, so this video, as I've got a 30-minute window before I now then check the mailbox again. For the natural man is an enemy to God, and has been from the fall of Adam, and will be forever and ever, unless he yields to the enticings of the Holy Spirit, and putteth off the natural man, and becometh a saint through the atonement of Christ the Lord, and becometh as a child, submissive, meek, humble, patient, full of love, willing to submit to all things which the Lord seeth fit to inflict upon him, even as a child doth submit to his father. Mahana, you ugly! Pay me too little. She is worth more than 8 cows. Yeah. In the Mormon Church, there are scriptures like this that are vague. They don't tell you specifics of what you can and cannot do. There is no checklist for Mormons, as much as Mormons demand a checklist and go crazy into depression, and Utah Mormon women are the highest per capita in the world who take depression meds because of this. Mormons want their agency taken from them so that they can know what they can check off of, so that they can be assured of an exaltation. When I've gone over the videos saying all you have to do is be washed and anointed in the temple, you're done. You don't need to sit for that whole hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes if it's in the Salt Lake live session, with the endowments. That's all you need is washing and anointing. And you're done, you're perfect, just as the Christ. Because you have been anointed to take upon yourselves the name of Christ. Christ meaning anointed. But nonetheless, people look for minute details in everybody's life. So they want to know, can I have chocolate? It has caffeine. I don't know. I need to know. Am I allowed to have chocolate? Can I drink a Mountain Dew? Am I going to burn in hell if I drink a Mountain Dew? And that's how Mormons get so fanatical. BYU refuses to sell caffeine. They sell chocolate. But they refuse to sell caffeine. And so there's an underground black market for Mountain Dew. But it's not a complicated religion that Mormons are making it out to be. I mean, they read something like this, and it's so vague in general, they're not sure how to do it, because natural man, what's a natural man? It's the senses. We gotta deny ourselves of all things sensual. And so I can't hear no evil, see no evil, and speak no evil. And well, my my older brother smells, so I don't want to smell that evil either. I'm the older brother in my family. Yeah, Mormons end up creating a bazillion hedge laws, far beyond what the Pharisees had done. And if Mormons would just step back and read their New Testament, they would realize Jesus was a rebel. He defied the hedge laws. He never broke the law of Moses. In fact, when he was with Lucifer in the desert, right before his ministry, as the story goes, Lucifer is saying, hey, Psalms says this. Well, why Psalms? Well, the Psalms of David. King David. Isn't he the son of David? Shouldn't he follow his ancestor who he's going to restore the kingdom of? And so Lucifer quotes Psalms and says, hey, throw yourself from the pinnacle. Angels will save you and you won't die. And so how does Jesus respond? Well, he responds with the Torah, the law of Moses. And I don't know if many Mormons know this. I don't know how many Christians even know it. But I would hope the church service missionaries put it in the footnotes. I know I tried to put them in the footnotes because we got to work on Matthew. But there's too much confusion when you try to create a billion laws. Because if you create a billion laws, well, then you can print them out and have a book of them. And, well, Spencer W. Kimball did Miracle of Forgiveness. There's a whole bunch of sins he lists out. Some of them you require a dictionary to know the meaning of. And then you go, well, that's interesting. I may want to try that one. Never knew what that was before, but now that I know, that looks kind of fun. That's where the bishops got in trouble, as they were asking little kids in the Mormon church for worthiness interviews, sexual-natured questions. And the little kids, they're not being taught sex ed by their parents. And so the bishop comes along and says, hey, are you doing this and this and this? And the little kid's going, mommy. And so daddy comes in to talk to the bishop and records them, goes viral. And the church now wants to ban all cell phone recordings. And try to put a stop to it, and they lose in the Utah legislature. And so the church has to come out and say, okay, bishops, you can only read from this script. And children and women can have a witness, not men. And so, if you had a checklist, yeah, you can just go through and make sure you can check everything off. And then you'll find out you can't do it all. That's what I learned when I was developing my own day planner. There was the Franklin planners that came out, but they weren't what I wanted. They weren't helping me into what I needed. So I designed my own. And there was one day, I remember, I was up in Rexburg, going to Rick's, staying at my grandparents' house, I think it was my grandparents. I don't think Grandpa had died yet. But there was one day I completed everything for that one day. And I was like, not the kind of response I was hoping to have. I mean, it was like no big deal. I realized that I was making a list of things that were not essential. They were just to-do lists, honey-do lists. Yes, dear, that dress makes you look very thin, like Jennifer Lopez's rear. And if you haven't seen the movie, I know most of the older women of my age have seen that movie. And so they know not to fall for it. But, I mean, you get people who create their own standards in the church. And, yeah, there are many Mormons, if they were to listen to this video, after 11 minutes now, they would have been offended at what I had just said. How dare you say such things? Not understanding the context at all, probably never saw the movie, and that's why they're jumping to anger rather than going, oh, that's from that movie with so-and-so and so-and-so. But, yeah, Mormons create their own standards, and it doesn't help when the church makes a For Strength of the Youth pamphlet. And again, it's vague in general. You know, you're supposed to wear modest clothing. Well, what's modest? And so most adults can figure it out in the church. Well, it has to cover up the garments. So women, of course, have been saying, make the garments so that they aren't shown with the new modern styles. And so the brethren change the garments for women, but they won't change them for men. You know, it's just... even the concept of garments, the underwear, they think it's magical, and so you can't expose any clothing because that's immodest. But the only thing that makes it holy are the markings. That's it. And so technically, women could get away with a micro bikini as long as they have the garment markings. It qualifies. And Mormons don't understand that. Because I worked at Beehive Clothing in the warehouse. I was told specifically, the garments are not sacred until the mark is put on them. Until then, nah. And that was like, well, yeah, I understand that. Makes sense. And so yes, technically, if it's the garment or the marking itself that qualifies anything as holy, you don't need to have them on your underwear. You can have them on your outer clothing, and it doesn't matter how much or how little clothing you have as long as it has the marking. And so you can have bands or tape or whatever, as long as it had the markings, that's it. And it's those kinds of loopholes that make problems in the church, as Mormons are faced with. That sounds wrong. I just feel that that's wrong, Travis. And it's because their concept of modest is based on having underwear that covers rather than the marks themselves. And Mormons forget that. And then the marks themselves aren't magical powers. But you hear Mormons talking about literally going to the beach, wearing their garments, their underwear. And of course they had swimsuit and a shirt, but they were wearing their underwear, and they get sunburned except where they were wearing their garments. And they don't stop and think, wait a minute, maybe it was covering up that prevented me from getting sunburned. They just don't think that way. And then you hear stories, and even from a particular movie that I'm remembering but can't remember the actress or the movie, but her mother said, don't go to the beach in a swimsuit. You'll get pregnant. And when you have parents who are that closed off in communicating with their kids, it creates generations of problems. As Mormons would wear their underwear in the shower. How dare they take them off? And it's like, wow, you're saving a lot of money, but what do you do when it's rags and falling off your body? I mean, how many seconds do you have until you burn in hell before you can put on a new pair? But I think it was the Victorian age, where the queens and princesses of England, in Europe even, were not taking off their clothes, and it were sticking to them. The whole concept of changing your clothes and bathing is just a hedge law that is forbidden, and they can justify it by David and Bathsheba. Oh, David saw Bathsheba naked as she was bathing on the roof, because that's where they bathed, was on the roof. But then you get people thinking, oh, well, then we're not allowed to bathe on the roof, and thus we're not allowed to be naked, and because we're ashamed of our nakedness, even though the one passage says that the man and the woman were naked and we're not ashamed. And so you get all sorts of problems because of the failure to understand life. If they just think, wait a minute, the one law is love. So if you don't love, what are you doing to your neighbor? You're committing crimes against them. You're denying them life, liberty, and property. You're not loving them. And people forget that when they get all caught up in what they need to do specifically on a second-by-second basis, wanting their agency taken from them. And then they get all offended when somebody violates their standards, because that other person doesn't have their standards. They have different standards, which they get offended at the other person for. Just love. Love. All you need is love. Shot in the back. Very sad. That one I do know, Independence Day. The father, when they get on the plane, he's trying to tell the woman, or I guess the ex, or the separating wife, all you need is love. John Lennon, shot in the back, very sad. Wise counsel.